Sound of Freedom is a crime thriller film co-written and directed by Alejandro Monteverde, starring Jim Caviezel in the lead role. It effectively draws attention to the often overlooked issue of human trafficking in a way that is guaranteed to shock even the most strong-willed of people. In Honduras, impoverished single father Roberto signs up his two children Miguel and Rocio to a modeling contract, at the request of a former beauty pageant winner. After leaving his children in her care, Roberto returns later that afternoon to pick them up, only to find the room where he left them is now completely empty. To his horror, Roberto soon discovers the terrible truth that his children have been abducted as sex slaves. In California, Homeland Security Special Agent Tim Ballard, who specializes in arresting pedophiles, is able to extract information from a recently caught predator that leads to the rescue of Miguel from a trafficker. After befriending Miguel, Tim makes him a promise that he will safely bring home Miguel's still missing sister Rocio from the clutches of these sick individuals, and quickly sets off on a perilous journey into the dark, twisted world of child trafficking. There's no subtle way of discussing the subject of sex trafficking, which remains a highly contentious matter in many countries around the globe. Even more so is when it involves young children, whose vulnerability makes them an easy target for these evil distributors. Many would rather ignore the elephant in the room and simply hope for the best that this problem will eventually disappear on its own one day, which, sadly, is quite impossible. Awareness to this cause is limited in mainstream media, likely due to the difficulty of having it depicted in a manner that will make people pay close attention to the topic at hand. The feature film Sound of Freedom pulls off this tricky task by means of showcasing the true story of Tim Ballard, whose harrowing experiences of rescuing child trafficking victims makes for a heartbreaking look at the sad state of the world we live in. Due to its heavy-handed subject matter, this film proves itself highly challenging to sit through at times. For instance, the opening scene of the imprisoned young girl Rocio sitting alone in a room with bars on the windows singing a sad song to herself is the perfect way to set the bleak tone for the rest of the movie. The depressing mood can only get worse from here on out as we soon learn that the reason Rocio is here is because she has been craftily abducted by a gang of child traffickers. Because of the lack of helpful resources in their developing country, Rocio's loving father Roberto has no hope of finding her on his own, and to make matters even harder, his younger son Miguel is also missing at the hands of the same group of kidnappers. Knowing full well what this group of perverted creeps intend to do to these children is nothing short of stomach-churning, and anybody with even the slightest amount of a conscience is certain to revile in disgust at some of the implied scenes that follow. It is worth noting that nothing here feels glorified for the sake of cheap entertainment. In fact, it actually comes across as a chilling reminder of how we must never let our guards down raising our children in today's dangerous society. However, there exists a sole beacon of hope among the evil of the world through Tim Ballard, whose job is to hunt down and bring to justice those who dare to harm innocent children. Though it would have been easy for the film to depict Tim as some kind of messianic action hero fighting his way through legions of pedophiles, we instead see him as a regular man who is only doing what he knows is morally correct. Being a father himself and like any caring parental figure, Tim is driven by his desire to keep children safe from the evil that lurks out there, even if that means exposing himself to some truly sickening material and the equally sick individuals responsible for it. As a result, Tim's faith in others is at an all-time low, but his devotion to his cause remains as strong as ever, believing that if he can save just one child's life then he has succeeded at his job. Tim is a true hero the audience can find themselves rallying behind, mainly because it is through his human qualities that we can see the believable driving force he has towards making a difference. In spite of its modest budget of $14.5 million, the film's production values are relatively solid for the most part. Director Alejandro Monteverde makes good use of cinematography and editing to illustrate some of the horrific consequences of child trafficking at various points. Almost all of the film's shocking content is conveyed to the audience through implications instead of simply being shown on screen, which I believe is a better creative decision. For example, one scene I found to be highly effective was where Tim was browsing through the computer files of a recently arrested pedophile, and the camera shows a close-up of his eye at an angle. Though we obviously don't see any explicit images, we can see the blurred reflection of them in Tim's gaze, which prompts him to shed a tear in dismay at what he is witnessing. There are other scenes like this that adopt a similar visual approach, but due to their disturbing nature I will not be discussing them at length here. I should also note that one particular moment was so upsetting to me personally that it nearly made me vomit, which is something that very rarely happens whenever I watch a movie. Taking on an unshakably serious role like Tim Ballard must have been hard, but Jim Caviezel manages to make it work in his own unique way. Caviezel's performance is greatly nuanced but never so much that he doesn't show any emotion at all. As previously mentioned, this is a man who is required to view the very worst humanity has to offer due to the nature of his job, so much so that it has permanently damaged his ability to properly show any external happiness. The only thing that keeps him going is the hope that he can rescue as many children as he can from the clutches of these evil smugglers. Despite all that, whenever he succeeds at saving either one child or several, Tim exhibits notable feelings of relief that he has done his duty, which is just as satisfying for the audience as it is for him. Tim is clearly not doing his job for financial gain, nor is he trying to flex his ego in front of his co-workers, but rather, he is doing this as a means to adhere to his own personal code of ethics. As one of the few feature films to touch on such a controversial topic, Sound of Freedom accomplishes its mission of bringing the necessary attention to its subject matter by means of a very well-made, albeit hard-hitting movie. Its depiction of child trafficking, while not too graphic, is certainly not for the faint of heart, and should prove difficult to stomach for some casual viewers. All I can say is that this film needs to be viewed with a mature mindset, in addition to an educated understanding that this is an ongoing issue that should not be ignored. For as long as we keep pretending this problem isn't worth addressing, things will never improve.